It began in silence. Earth's orbit was a black canvas, scattered with the steady blinking lights of navigation beacons. Far below, the planet turned slowly in the sun's pale gold, blue oceans catching the light like molten glass. To any passing observer, the human-built station Aegis Prime looked like nothing more than another orbital dockyard. But deep in its armored heart, behind layers of blast shielding, sat something new. Something no species had ever seen before. It was called the Titan's Lance. Captain Rhea Andrus stood at the command deck of the UES Horizon, watching technicians scurry over final calibrations. Her voice, calm but edged with anticipation, echoed through the ship. "Coil alignment complete?" "Complete, ma'am," replied her weapons officer. "Magnetic rails charged, superconductors at peak efficiency. Projectile loaded, tungsten slug, 50 kilograms." Rhea's gaze swept the displays. The target, an old, decommissioned pirate cruiser, drifted in the shadow of asteroid RX-221. A rusted hulk, nothing more than a ceremonial victim for the first live fire. Except, the whole galaxy was watching. Not physically present, but through encrypted feeds. Representatives from dozens of civilizations, from the Crystal and Eric's Commonwealth to the sprawling Andoran Dominion, had tuned in to see what the humans were so smug about. The general consensus was that this coilgun was nothing more than a quaint throwback, a metal stick thrower in an age of energy weapons. Rhea knew better. The Titan's Lance was humanity's answer to centuries of galactic condescension. It didn't require rare antimatter, unstable plasma, or fragile graviton cores. It didn't care about shields designed to disperse particle beams. It used physics, pure, brutal, unshakable physics. "Open the firing range," she ordered. Across the Horizon's hull, kilometer-long magnetic rails hummed to life. Capacitors groaned, energy flowing like lightning through superconducting coils. The slug sat within its cradle, waiting. "Fire," Rhea said. The sound was nothing. Space swallowed the roar before it could exist. But the ship shuddered faintly as the slug leapt from the rails, hurled forward at 12 kilometers per second. The cruiser's sensors had barely registered an incoming object before the impact. One moment, the target was whole. The next, it was a cloud of molten shards, its aft section vaporized, forward deck splitting apart like a crushed soda can. The slug didn't stop, it punched through the asteroid behind, carving a perfect tunnel through 200 meters of rock before vanishing into the void. The Horizon's targeting computer reported that the slug maintained 87% of its velocity even after the destruction. Across the galaxy, alien dignitaries watching the feed went silent. On the Horizon's bridge, Rhea allowed herself the smallest of smiles. "Mark the coordinates where it exits the belt," she said. "Let's see how far our little stone can skip." Hours later, deep space monitors in the adjacent system registered something impossible, a 50-kilogram chunk of tungsten screaming past their satellites, still traveling fast enough to gut a battleship. The slug had crossed millions of kilometers without losing lethal potential. That's when the panic began. In the Andoran Dominion's High War Council chambers, the footage replayed on a loop. "They built a mass driver," one admiral said, voice dripping with disbelief. "No," countered another. "This is no ordinary mass driver. That velocity. It renders shields meaningless," a third interrupted, tail flicking nervously. "Our deflectors disperse energy, not rocks." The Eric's Commonwealth was no calmer. Their ships, elegant lattices of crystalline armor, were built to refract lasers and scatter plasma. A slug like this would pass through them as if they were spun glass. Newsnet channels across civilized space flooded with speculation. Was this a new arms race? Would the humans sell this technology? Would they use it? In backroom diplomatic channels, desperate messages flew toward Earth. On Aegis Prime, Rhea was already fielding the first of them. "You're aware," said the Andoran ambassador on the secure channel, "that such a weapon violates Section 12 of the Interstellar Armament Accord." "Section 12 applies to exotic weapons of mass destruction," Rhea replied evenly. "We simply accelerated a piece of metal." "You know perfectly well." "I know," Rhea cut in, "that our nearest rivals deploy antimatter warheads capable of annihilating cities. We've just shown you that we can protect ourselves using nothing but basic engineering. The ambassador's frilled crest twitched, a silent gesture of discomfort. You've shifted the balance of power, Captain. That's the idea, Rhea said, and ended the call. In the weeks that followed, the phrase Titan's Lance became infamous. Fleets scrambled to retrofit armor plating. Research stations poured funding into counter-coilgun defenses, though few had any idea what those would even look like. Yet the deeper fear wasn't just about the weapon. It was about what it revealed. Humanity, the so-called junior species of the galactic stage, had skipped over centuries of conventional weapons development and gone straight to something brutally effective. Something they could mass-produce with little more than metal, magnets, and stubborn will. And if they'd done this once, what else were they working on? 6 months after the test, a small skirmish broke out on the fringe of human space. A band of Corsair raiders attacked in or convoy near Vega 9, confident that their shields could withstand any human defense. The UES Resolute, a frigate armed with a smaller coilgun array, intercepted. It fired once. One slug. One ship. Gone. The surviving raiders fled without firing another shot. Word spread faster than the light from the impact. The galaxy never quite recovered. Yes, they built defenses. They layered armor, reinforced hulls, and developed experimental kinetic dampeners. But every engineer knew the truth: no matter what they built, a lump of tungsten moving at 12 kilometers per second could still turn their pride and joy into a drifting coffin. The Titan's lance had fired only once in public. It didn't need to fire again. The shot was still traveling, somewhere in the dark between stars, a tiny chunk of human-made metal streaks silently through the void, a testament to the day the galaxy learned a very old, very human truth. You don't need to burn your enemy to ashes. You just need to hit them hard enough. The star Proxima 7 was dying. Its light came in fits and flares, bleeding radiation into the surrounding system like a wounded predator. Around it hung the Galactic Assembly's grand orbital citadel, a city of metal and glass where diplomacy reigned and wars were supposedly kept outside its borders. On this day, its main audience chamber was filled with species from across the Orion Arm. They had gathered for something that, on paper, sounded laughably unimportant: the human demonstration of a new projectile weapon. A projectile weapon. For most of the galaxy, those two words were synonymous with the age of stone clubs and black powder. Primitive, crude, utterly obsolete in an era of antimatter warheads and precision graviton beams. Ambassador Calvor of the Threx Confederation whispered to his neighbor, an insectoid delegate from the Scara hives, "I fail to see the point. Is this human vanity? Nostalgia?" The insectoid's mandibles clicked in amusement. Probably both. Their species thrives on theatrics. Yet when the chamber's massive holoscreen flickered to life, the chatter subsided. A human warship, the UES Vanguard, loomed in the feed, its dark hull stark against the glittering asteroid belt of Vega 5. The camera panned along its length until it settled on the coilgun, a long, matte black spine running the dorsal ridge of the ship. "This," came the voice of Captain Elias Drake, commander of the Vanguard, "is the Mark IV electromagnetic kinetic accelerator. Or, if you prefer, a coilgun. Today, you will see why it matters." The target was a decommissioned Andoran heavy frigate, shields active but weapons offline. It had been reinforced for the test to ensure fairness. Every alien observer knew that was a pointless gesture. Shields could shrug off physical debris easily enough. Or so they believed. "Rails charged," reported Drake's weapons officer. The hum of the capacitors bled faintly into the ship's audio feed. "Projectile loaded, depleted uranium core, 60 kilos. Firing solution locked." The captain's voice was calm, but every human on the bridge understood the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a weapons test. It was a challenge to centuries of galactic military doctrine. Fire. The camera feed caught only a faint blur as the slug left the barrel, accelerated along the magnetic rails at hypersonic speed. In a heartbeat, it slammed into the frigate's forward shields. The shields flared and then shattered. The slug punched through the ship's bow, shredding reinforced armor like wet paper. It tore through the central spine, rupturing power conduits and scattering fragments of superheated metal into space. And it didn't stop. It kept going, slicing through 2 asteroids on the far side of the target before disappearing from the sensors entirely. The Vanguard's telemetry showed the slug was still traveling at lethal velocity more than a planetary orbit away. The Galactic Assembly Chamber went utterly silent. Ambassador Vor's crest flattened against his skull. "That wasn't possible," he muttered. In the crystalline balconies above, the Eric's delegation's refractive skin dulled to a pale, unsettled blue, the equivalent of a shiver. Their warships relied entirely on deflecting light-based weaponry. They had no answer for a lump of metal moving so fast it ignored every shield equation in the book. A Skara Hivelord leaned forward, antennae quivering. "Play it again," they demanded. The footage replayed, this time from the perspective of a drone trailing the projectile's path. The moment it struck, the frigate didn't explode, it came apart. The kind of clean, surgical disassembly that frightened military tacticians far more than a messy energy blast. "This violates no treaty," Captain Drake's voice continued over the feed. "It uses no forbidden material, no exotic particles. Just magnets, metal, and mathematics." Panic spread faster than the slug had. Within days, classified memos crossed the networks of every major power. The Threx Confederation ordered immediate testing of kinetic dampeners, though none of their prototypes could handle the raw momentum of a human slug. The Eric's Commonwealth recalled its fleets to retrofit armor at staggering cost, while the Skara hives began drafting a fleet doctrine that avoided direct confrontation with human coilgun ships entirely. Military analysts began whispering a phrase no one wanted to say out loud: shield obsolescence. 2 weeks later, the first real incident occurred. A pirate flotilla raided the mining colonies of the Vega 5 belt, targeting freighters carrying iridium ore. The Andoran patrol ship Drell 2 intercepted, but found itself pinned down by superior pirate numbers. That was when the UES Vanguard arrived. From nearly 1,000,000 kilometers away, well beyond the range of conventional ship-to-ship combat, the Vanguard's coilgun spoke. One slug vaporized the lead pirate corvette's bridge. Another passed clean through 2 ships in formation. The rest of the flotilla fled without returning fire. The Drell 2's captain, a veteran of the Dominion's navy, sent an after-action report to his superiors. It contained only 3 words: "We are unprepared." In the Galactic Assembly, debates turned heated. "We must ban this weapon immediately," shouted Vor, pounding his clawed hand against the podium. "The balance of power is at stake." "Ban it," hissed the Eric's High Envoy, refracting crimson in agitation. "Or build our own. We cannot afford a technology gap." The Skara delegate clicked slowly, mandibles twitching. "Humans have changed the equation. You may ban physics if you wish, but you will fail to enforce it." The human ambassador simply smiled. "We welcome peaceful dialogue," they said smoothly. "And we assure you, the coilgun is purely defensive." It was the oldest diplomatic lie in the book. Months passed, and the galaxy adapted, or tried to. New hull designs rolled off alien shipyards with dense composite plating. Experimental magnetic shields were tested in deep space. But even these advances came with crushing economic costs, and none offered full protection. Meanwhile, humanity quietly expanded its coilgun fleet. The Vanguard was joined by the Resolute, the Peregrine, and a half-dozen smaller ships, each carrying weapons tuned for different ranges and impact profiles. Some fired slugs at such velocity that even a near miss could rip sensor arrays from an enemy hull. Rumors whispered through military circles of orbital coilguns the size of cities, capable of hitting targets on planetary surfaces from halfway across a system. None of these rumors were ever confirmed. But no one could prove they were false, either. The coilgun incident became more than a demonstration. It became a line in history, a before and after. Before, shield technology had rendered physical weapons obsolete. After, every fleet commander in the galaxy had to live with the knowledge that at any moment, from impossible range, a silent, invisible slug could end them. The weapon didn't burn. It didn't roar. It simply arrived. And when it did, you wouldn't even have time to know it was coming. The galaxy had been quiet for almost 50 years. Too quiet. The great galactic wars had ended in treaties signed under the shadow of exhausted fleets and burned worlds. Borders were drawn, grudges buried, at least on the surface. Every major power understood that peace was just an intermission. Somewhere, someday, a spark would reignite the fire. That spark came from Earth. It happened during what was supposed to be a routine military exercise. The United Earthship Resolute, a brand new heavy cruiser, was to test its latest planetary defense system in the outer orbit of Sigma Draconis 4. Officially, the test was a show of deterrence against hypothetical asteroid strikes. Unofficially, it was meant to send a very different message, one that would ripple across the Orion Arm. Captain Mara Lorne stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her hands clasped behind her back. The massive coilgun mounted along the ship's spine, the Mjolnir pattern electromagnetic accelerator, loomed like a black spear against the void. Her weapons officer looked up from his console. Capacitors charged. Projectile loaded. 65 kilo tungsten carbide penetrator, triple hardened. Target status? Lorne asked. The tactical display showed a retired Dominion dreadnought, hulking and inert, floating at a safe distance. Even stripped of its crew and weapons, the ship still bristled with heavy armor plating, the kind that had withstood direct plasma bombardments during the war. Target locked, the officer confirmed. Lorne's voice was steady, almost casual. Fire. The coilgun didn't roar. It sang. An invisible current surged through superconducting rails, hurling the slug into the abyss at 15 kilometers per second. The impact was almost anticlimactic, a faint flash of light as the slug struck the dreadnought's forward plating. Then, like an egg cracking in slow motion, the armor split. Sensors registered catastrophic hull failure in less than 2 seconds. The slug tore straight through the ship, exiting with such force that it created a shockwave in the thin gas of space, scattering debris for hundreds of kilometers. Every sensor buoy, every drone camera, every observer ship caught the same impossible image: a single shot, a single projectile, and a warship reduced to drifting ruins. The footage spread like wildfire. On Eric's Prime, crystalline admirals replayed the impact frame by frame, their refractive bodies dimming with unease. On Threk's homeworlds, military strategists stared at simulation models, only to realize their shield arrays were useless against such an attack. In the Skara hives, brood mothers whispered in their underground chambers, recognizing the danger of a weapon that didn't care about energy fields or swarm tactics. It wasn't just the weapon's power that terrified them. It was the simplicity. A coilgun didn't require exotic fuel. It didn't rely on delicate, easily disrupted energy emitters. All it needed was metal, magnets, and electricity. Humanity could build hundreds of them without straining their economy, and they didn't need galactic permission to do it. The first political shockwaves hit within days. The Dominion Navy sent a formal protest to Earth's delegation at the Galactic Council. "This is an escalation," their ambassador hissed, tail lashing in agitation. "You have developed a weapon that undermines the stability of every treaty signed since the wars." The human ambassador's smile was polite, almost bored. "We have developed a weapon that ensures our self-defense. Surely you would not deny us the right to protect our worlds? You've made every fleet in the galaxy obsolete," the Dominion envoy snapped. Then perhaps, the human replied smoothly, "It is time the galaxy adapted." Adapt they tried. Within months, shipyards across the Orion Arm were working around the clock. New armor composites were tested, dense enough to absorb kinetic impacts, but they slowed ships to a crawl. Experiments with magnetic deflectors failed to account for the sheer velocity of the slugs. The fastest point defense systems in existence could track incoming projectiles, but not hit them in time. Even the most optimistic tacticians admitted, in closed-door sessions, that there was no real defense. Only avoidance. That changed fleet doctrine overnight. Where once admirals positioned warships in grand, proud formations, now they scattered them in thin lines to reduce the risk of multiple kills from a single shot. Planetary defense grids shifted from energy-based weaponry to high-velocity counterfire. The galaxy was changing, and everyone knew who had changed it. The first real test of the Resolute's power came sooner than expected. A border skirmish erupted between human colonies and a Corsair raiding fleet in the outer Vega sector. The Corsair, a species known for their sleek, shield-heavy cruisers, outnumbered the human defenders 2-1. They expected an easy victory. They didn't expect the resolute. From beyond visual range, the human cruiser fired its first slug. It crossed the gap in less than a minute, hitting the lead Corsair warship dead center. The ship didn't explode. It simply came apart, hull fragments scattering in a silent spray. The Corsair commander ordered evasive maneuvers. It didn't matter. The second shot crippled another cruiser, the slug passing through its reactor compartment and detonating the fuel reserves. The survivors fled without returning fire. By the time word reached the Galactic Council, the battle was already being called the Two-Shot War. It was then the Council realized something chilling: the psychological power of the Coilgun might be greater than its physical damage. Enemy fleets, knowing they could be annihilated from extreme range without warning, began to break and run before human ships even fired. In the following years, humanity didn't overuse the weapon. They didn't need to. The threat of the Coilgun became enough to sway negotiations, end disputes, and keep hostile fleets far from human space. But in hidden shipyards, away from prying alien eyes, larger projects took shape. Planetary coilguns with rails stretching for kilometers. Deep space defense stations that could target anything in a solar system from its edge. Even rumors of skip slugs, projectiles designed to ricochet off planetary atmospheres and strike targets halfway across a star system. No one could confirm those projects existed. No one wanted to find out the hard way. A decade after the first test, the original slug from the Resolute was still traveling through space. Astronomers tracked it for years, watching it pass between systems, still moving fast enough to gut a battleship. Eventually, it left known space entirely, bound for the deep void between spiral arms. The galaxy would never see it again. But it didn't need to. Because on the day humanity fired that first shot, it hadn't just destroyed a ship. It had destroyed an entire way of thinking, the belief that shields and energy weapons had rendered brute force physics obsolete. The galaxy would remember that lesson forever.